And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, to everybody out there on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Welcome to the opening episode of the Bama Factor with Alex Taylor for the 2024 football season. I'm your host, as always, Alex Taylor, joined once again for the start of the season by my father, a privilege again, Steve Taylor, and Dad. How are you tonight?
Doing great, Alex. We're coming live from Orange Beach, Alabama. This is what we did the last couple of times, and looking forward to what I have to say tonight. New era, new everything, but tradition as it is will be the same, and so we're looking forward to this season.
Absolutely, and we want to take this time to let you know that this podcast and this episode is brought to you by the College Huddle. The Bama Factor is the lone Alabama representative of the College Huddle. Over 70 podcasts all over the country are members of the College Huddle. This is a whole podcast community that just recently launched in the summer. I personally got an invitation from Eric Boggs, who runs the Ohio State podcast. A good way to expand, but we are an official member of the College Huddle, so shout out to the College Huddle. Check us out at thecollegehuddle.com to see all the podcasts, all the episodes, all the articles for every team across those 70 podcasts represented. And of course, check out my page there under the Bama Factor, under the SEC page as well. So we're going to jump right in just to opening thoughts. So I already gave my opening thoughts on an episode earlier. So I guess, Dad, I will ask you, Nick Saban retires at the end of the season. Nobody really saw it coming. Take us through just in brief, what your reaction when you heard the news, and actually you heard it from me because I called you, what your reaction was when Saban actually officially hung it up.
You know, Alex, I think like most loyal, faithful Alabama fans who truly are fans, not fair weather fans, it took us all by surprise. Even though we knew this day would come, we just didn't think it was going to be that day. Finishing up a season, falling just a little short of beating Michigan and playing for a national title against, how ironic, our next head coach that we would have been playing against had we made it. But it took a lot of folks by surprise, me included. And you're never ready for it, but we have moved on. I honestly believe, just on this side of this season starting, that we are looking at the best coach we could have hired. And I firmly believe, after researching, looking at some of the footage of games he's coached in, especially in the last year, and his overall record as being probably the best record for the first 10 years of a head coach's life in the NCAA. So, yes, shocked by it. Took a little while to get over it. The search, thankfully, didn't take very long. Greg did a great job and went after who he wanted and him only, and got him in. And it's just hearing from the players. We lost some, and there were sharks in the water when this happened, and we knew that would happen. But the story is, what will Kalen Debeor do now? And I think, based on what I've heard from players that are there that decided to stay, that have definitely committed to this program, not to Coach Saban, but to the program. Now, both, obviously. And, he's the GOAT. He's the one you want to play for forever. But he's not always going to be around. So we have moved on. New chapter. The shock's over. We will see what happens in the season. I'm looking forward to it personally. I think we're underrated at this point, but we'll talk about that more later.
I agree. And again, took me by surprise for sure, shocked, but the quick turnaround that Greg Byrne had, asking the team, give me 72 hours. He had, KD hired in 48. So, again, he did the same thing with Nate Oates, did the same thing with our baseball coach. So, really kind of trusting Greg Byrne, had KD on a flight to Tuscaloosa. He actually flew to Washington, offered him the job, had him to Tuscaloosa, got him there. And right before we go into our first segment, let's talk about a little bit of the staff that Kalen Debeor actually brought in with him, and starting with just a couple names. He brings in Nick Sheridan, a guy who he worked with at Indiana as the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. He brings in Jamarcus Shepard, who is now the assistant head coach, co-offensive coordinator, and wide receiver coach. Brings over several other guys as well, Jay Nunez. But I think the biggest one, and he's not even an on-field coach, but Courtney Morgan. And Alabama has never had this type of position, but general manager. And oversees football operations and is just really able to facilitate the transition that occurred when obviously KD took the job here and brought Courtney Morgan with him, and big on the recruiting scene. Him and KD got to work immediately, and Courtney's been a big part of landing some of these 2025 recruits that's kind of vaulted us to the number 2 class. So as far as the staff that he hired over the summer and keeping guys like Freddie Roach and Robert Gillespie, how do you think from a staff standpoint we stand headed into 2024?
Well, you've got a little connect there with some staff that stayed, and I think that's always important. They know the players, they've been around them, they know their likes and dislikes and their personalities, and so that can be a very valuable asset to the new head coach and the new coaching staff, period. We've got a lot of big hitters in there, Alex. I mean, we've already talked about Coach Debeor a little bit, but when you start talking about Nick Sheridan, where he came from, and he's our offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, and just you could go down the list of coaches and you see they've all had success. And there's some ties back, maybe at Indiana. Was it in Indiana where Kalen and who coached together?
Sheridan coached together.
Sheridan, yeah.
And Kane as well.
Right. Kane Womack. So there's already some cohesiveness and, familiarity there. So they've had the opportunity to work together before. But having the little holdover there, Freddie Roach he's been named assistant head coach, and he's coaching the defensive line. And Freddie was a great player at Alabama, was a linebacker, and really enjoyed watching him play. And he's one of those that's turned out to be a really good coach. So that and the whole staff seems to have meshed together very well so far. We'll see what live game action's like starting this Saturday, and looking very forward to it. I don't. If you had to go through a list of resumes, these are pretty doggone good ones we've got here that are going to be leading this team this year.
I agree. And then, also on this team, including KD as our head coach, you have 2 former head coaches at the Division I level, and Kane Womack from South Alabama, and our defensive backs coach, Maurice Linguist, who came from Buffalo, and, really kind of turned Buffalo around. So 2 former head coaches on the staff, coaching these guys, really intense guys, kind of a fresh energy on this, especially a guy like Jamarcus Shepard as well, a guy who brings the energy every day. So staying on tune with Jamarcus Shepard and Sheridan as we talk about the offensive side, let's talk about this Alabama offense this year. Alabama's offense is going to look a little bit different this year because Kalen Debeor has a system of it's more up-tempo, it's really fast-paced, it's a lot of quick throws, it's a lot of getting the ball out quick, really up-tempo style of offense. And Saban kind of adapted to that in the latter part of his career. He grew up hating it, didn't like the up-tempo offense. It was his Achilles heel, and then he adapted to it and became better at it than anybody, especially when he had guys like Jalen Hurts and Tua and Mac Jones and Bryce had to adapt to it with the types of quarterbacks that you have in this age now, because it seems like your pro-style quarterbacks are kind of few and far between now of the guys who can just really get under center and really kind of manage a game now, unless you're at some of the smaller schools that don't really run up-tempo offenses. But, if you look at Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, Ohio State, Clemson, Florida State, etc., you've got a lot of up-tempo offenses now. So as far as the offense goes, obviously it's going to look a little bit different, but let's start with some of the constants, the things that haven't changed. One thing that's staying the same is we got to start with, our signal caller, Jalen Milroe. So, obviously, very good to hang on to him through the transition. You don't want to lose a guy like that to transition. Obviously, that was my biggest concern was, does he go anywhere? But just hearing him talk over the summer, the guy is really committed to Alabama. Very well-spoken guy. Loves the team, is really bought into the team, is bought into the Lank mantra, obviously, that has taken the college football world by storm as well, and has really kind of encaptivated this team, and is now named a team captain for the 2nd year in a row. He's obviously thought of very highly by his peers. So what do you think with this new coaching staff, Kalen Debeor, and what Nick Sheridan can do with Jalen Milroe's skill set heading into 2024?
Alex, Jalen Milroe is one player, but so thankful that he stayed. I remember you and I discussing this, and Jalen came out and said this when he first met Coach Debeor. It was for about 2 hours, and football was not discussed. He talked about his faith, and he talked about his family, and wanted to know more about Jalen. And I think every player had the opportunity to sit in front of Coach Debeor and have a one-on-one session with him, and I think that's one of the things that attracts so many. I mean, look where we are in recruiting right now. How we finished out this year in a year that we were changing from Coach Saban to Coach Debeor, and he closed the deal on many of these players and pulled some others in. So just fantastic. But there's no doubt in my mind that had we lost Jalen, it would have hurt us, not taking anything away from our other quarterbacks like Tyler and Ty and Dylan and Ty. And, but him coming back is huge for us. The experience he brings, the level he was playing at the second half of the season was unmatched, in my opinion. And, so that was key for us to hold on to him.
I agree entirely. I think with what really this staff can do with his throwing ability, obviously we know he has the ability to extend plays with his feet. He's got great speed. He's got good athleticism. Really has a good deep ball. Had the best deep ball of anybody in America a year ago.
Just ask Auburn.
Exactly. 4th and 31. But what Alabama fans really wanted to see, especially you and I talked about a lot, is those short to intermediate throws. Those are the ones that you've got to be accurate on. Those are the ones you have to be consistent on.
And Alex, if I can interject one thing right here, just watching some of the footage of Coach DeBoer's style of offense he runs, it reminds me a lot of Steve Spurrier. Clearing zones, getting somebody in the flats wide open because you've flooded that, you've pulled safeties, you've pulled cornerbacks away. You end up with a linebacker trying to guard a slot receiver or a running back, and I just really like the way he creates vacancies in the defense and takes advantage of it. And I think that's something that is very Spurrier-esque. For his fun and gun offense from the 90s, and when Florida won a national title in 96, and they were competitive in the SEC every year he was there, basically. So I liken it to that type of offense, and the tools that we have to do that with, and the coach that we've got calling the plays. I think it's going to really be a good year.
I agree, and so now obviously you have your signal caller, but as you know, a lot of coaches have said, your quarterback's only as good as the weapons around him. So, obviously, sometimes your quarterback is made by the guys who he has playing around him, and he has to have help from those around him. So, kind of really going to the running back and the wide receiver room, really two of the rooms I think that really the rest of college football is kind of underrating. You start in the running back room. You return Jam Miller. You lose Jace McClellan to the NFL. Roydell Williams transfers to Florida State. But you get in two really talented true freshmen in Daniel Hill or Kevin Riley. But you return Richard Young, former 4-star redshirt freshman. But you have Jam Miller coming back, who had really good reps last season, especially in the SEC championship game when Jace was down. But another guy that I was glad that we really hung on to during this transition was Justice Haynes. A guy who is a Georgia legacy who surprised everybody when he committed to Alabama. Kind of last year kind of had a Najee Harris-esque freshman year where highly recruited, didn't really get a lot of playing time. I was kind of worried he might transfer out because he could have been starting really anywhere else in America. But and I know one of the biggest things that we talked about in the offseason is, we started the third quarter of the semifinal game, and we ran him 7 straight times, and he got positive yardage on all of them, and then we took him out of the game. And he was still perfectly healthy. The guy was still asking for carries. But with him coming back and with Jam kind of leading the way, I think those guys are going to split it. Don't sleep on Richard Young, I think. But from your standpoint, what do you think the strength of the running back room can be, especially in this type of offense that we're going to see this year?
Well, Alex, I've only seen high school footage for Kevin Riley and Daniel Hill, but they're obviously very talented players. Both are 4-stars coming out of high school, ranked in the top 5 at their position. As a matter of fact, what were they ranked, Alex?
Kevin Riley was actually number 8.
Okay.
Daniel Hill, he was listed as an athlete, but he was a top 10 athlete in the class as well. So.
But obviously with Jam and Justice and Richard, they're going to share a lot of carries. People may look at Coach DeBoer and they say he's going to throw the ball a lot more than he runs it. After we saw what Penix did last year. But then there were great games where they had, for example, against Oregon, over 200 yards rushing that game, and the second time around. So, obviously Jam and Justice are going to be your every down back, rotating in and out, and Young's going to get a good bit of playing time. And we'll see how these two freshmen step up. If they do, they will see the field, I do believe. So I feel very confident that we've got the skill that we need there. I feel confident that they're being coached up and developed, and we'll continue to watch that. I think they're getting stronger, faster, better at what they do.
I agree completely. And now really go into the pass catchers, and as Jamarcus Shepard as he calls them the takers, and he says they're going to take people's souls, they're going to take people's ankles, and they're going to take people's pride. And when you look at the wide receiver room, and you look at just the raw talent that we have, and just one word comes to mind, it's speed, and just the versatility of the room. And I think where it starts is guys who stayed on through the transition as well. When you look at guys like Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, and Emmanuel Henderson, definitely the veterans in the room, guys who have been there for now 3 years, came in the same recruiting class together. Kendrick Law has really stepped up a lot, being the vocal leader of the group. You look at Kobe Prentice, Alabama grown, Calera High School, really good player throughout there, has been a really good player for us for 2 years. Then you look at Emmanuel Henderson right there from Geneva County in Hartford, not too far from where I live now, and one of the top running backs in high school, switched to wide receiver because of his versatility in college, was really going to be starting last year before an injury kind of sidelined him for the first part of the season. But you start with those guys, and then on top of that, you bring in a guy like Jeremy Bernard from Washington, who even last year with Cedric Polk, Nate McMillan, and Rome Odunze, 3 guys who went in the NFL draft from Washington last year, and 2 of those guys caught for over 1,000 yards, and then you have McMillan who catches for a little bit over 800. Jeremy still had over 400 yards receiving a year ago, and still had plenty of touchdowns to go with it. Now he's kind of the guy. He's going to be the guy here, and has the potential to be wide receiver 1. And we obviously saw flashes of that in the A-Day game with 3 catches for 123 yards. So just starting with those 4 guys right there, who do you really see out of those 4 right there kind of emerging as the guy, or do you really see all 4 of them kind of splitting that?
I do see several of the guys. We have a dozen wide receivers that are listed. Of those, 5 are 5 stars. The others are 4 stars except for one. That's Cole Adams. And I'm anxious to see what this young man can do when he gets on the field, because he's a very steady football player. He's a clutch player. But, talking about what we've got coming back, obviously Law, Hale, and Prentice, and, throw Emmanuel Henderson in that. Those are all solid players that are good at their skill level is very good. Obviously, they're 4 and 5 stars. You mentioned Jeremy, and we can't overlook Ryan Williams. Probably the best wide receiver in high school football, and came out a year early.
I was actually about to get to him. Yeah.
He says that he's obviously ready. He's a grown man. He's ready to play college football in the toughest conference there is, at the highest level there is, and so we're excited about what he can do. He could be we had some Rugrats a few years ago, in Ruggs and Judy and Smith, and then along came Waddle. So he looks like he's cut out of that same mold. But we've got some very steady receivers. I think they will obviously, because if you look back to Washington staff and what Coach Debeor did with that offense last year, take them to a national title game, beating Oregon twice, beating Texas, and for the second year in a row, and quite honestly, not near as big and physical as Texas, but they beat them, they finessed them, and it was a close game and all, but how he developed those receivers at Washington and turned them into first-round draft picks, 1 or 2 of them, was amazing. So I look forward to him bringing those same attributes of his coaching style to Tuscaloosa and working with these guys, because the talent is there. It just needs to be developed and coached properly, and I firmly believe it will.
I agree. Ryan Williams is a guy who, 2-time Mr. Football winner in the state of Alabama, first sophomore to ever win the award 2 years ago, won it again last year, and like we said, came out a year early. Kid had over 6,000 all-purpose yards in 3 years of football. I mean, that's unheard of these days, and was the number 1 overall recruit for the 2025 class, and reclassified, and was still a top 5 recruit. So tells you how good the kid is, and also a testament to the coaching staff to re-recruit him and to get him recommitted to the standard, and especially Jamarcus Shepard. Courtney Morgan had a lot to do with that as well. But like you said, you look down at the dozen wide receivers that we have, And one more guy that we can't forget is Caleb Odom. And number one tight end in the class, Carrollton, Georgia, actually plays with current USC commit Julian Lewis was his quarterback. But, this guy, 6'5", 230, and Jamarcus Shepard and KD each said when he came into Alabama, this guy doesn't need to just be blocking. This guy's got to be catching the football. Because, this guy is a when he was a tight end, he was a tight end in a wide receiver's body. A wide receiver's in a tight end's body. So to have 6'5" and just the range and the length, obviously we saw in a couple of the clips from the first scrimmage, had a one-handed catch on the sideline, had a couple of other really explosive plays. But Odom can be kind of a star-studded freshman that I think can kind of scare the rest of the SEC when they play against him, because you're talking about a guy who you get on the goal line situation and you get matched up with a 6'1" linebacker, then all you gotta do is throw the ball up to him and just let him go get it at that point.
Well, if he's matched up with a linebacker, period, I think it's going to be trouble for them. But most of your defensive backs, most are recruited somewhere between 6'1", 6'2", with certain attributes, certain weight, certain height. And you see a handful of big receivers around the country, but I think what Caleb Odom brings in as a true freshman here is going to be fun to watch. He has the tools. He's a little light to play tight end, but he's got the speed, he's got the hands, got the height, and hopefully the athleticism, I'm sure, or he wouldn't have been a 5-star, to continue to improve this stable of receivers that we have in Tuscaloosa right now.
I agree. And then just slightly touching, obviously it's always good to have experience back, leadership back on that side of the offense. Going to the tight end position, having C.J. Dupree back for his senior year, huge in the blocking presence, but is going to be more involved in the passing game this year. Coach Debeor says he wants to use the tight ends, and Brian Ellis is our tight end coach now, really getting those guys ready to go. You have Danny Lewis Jr., you have Ty Lockwood, Robbie Oots is back, just a really great blocker, has really developed into a great just overall well-rounded player. And then you bring in guys like Josh Suevas from Washington as well, who has had experience with Coach KD and had experience at the tight end position as well and played at a high level. But now kind of going to the last thing as we round out this segment and we get ready to move to the other side of the ball, but kind of the Achilles heel for Alabama last year that's looking to be a strength for it this year, and that's the offensive line. Obviously had some snapping issues last year with our former center Seth McLaughlin, who's now transferred to Ohio State. Lost some guys like Terrence Ferguson to Florida State. A couple other guys went elsewhere. J.C. Latham, obviously, to the draft in the top 10, was the first Alabama player taken, and number 8 to the Tennessee Titans. Number 7 to the Tennessee Titans. But you look at what Alabama brings into the offensive line room. You lose your center, so you go get the best center in the transfer portal, who was on a Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line last year at Washington, in Parker Brailsford. Guy's only 6'2", 295 pounds, a little undersized for center, but teammates Tyler Booker and Jaden Roberts say he's got some of the strongest hands and some of the quickest hands and the best technique they've ever seen. So it's always good coming from them. You also do return your alpha dog in Tyler Booker, who really kind of represents the Alabama standard when you think of guys to represent the school. He was the one who said he received 50 or 60 calls from other schools to transfer out, and he said, "Don't call me again." He said he was committed to the change and committed to the program as well. And then you've got Jaden Roberts, who is nicknamed the Hulk, who is just absolutely a freak, who came on against Texas A&M last year and started the rest of the season. And really the run game started really starting to produce at that time last year. But then over the offseason, we had a little transfer saga with Caden Proctor. Former 5-star, freshman All-American last year, struggled at times, but kind of came on at the end of the season. So he decides to transfer back home to Iowa, realizes a month in, wrong choice, transfers back to Bama, and now has earned his starting role back. So now bringing in Chris Kapolovic, a guy who Saban wanted to hire for years, who's just really a great offensive line coach at Baylor, North Carolina. So much so the Baylor fans on Twitter were tweeting how sad and disappointed they were that he was leaving to come to Alabama. As far as the offensive line goes, what's your expectation this year, and who do you really think is going to be the strength of that line this year?
Well, again, Alex, heavy with 5 and 4 stars. We have experience and inexperience, but talented. It's like putting a puzzle together. And, the same 5 guys who start the season against Western Kentucky this Saturday may not be the 5 that start when we play for the national title, which I hope. But finding the right chemistry and watching Brailsford, I think he's going to be a great center for us. Like I say, maybe a bit undersized, but tenacious and really good hands and feet. And he's the quarterback of that line. He's the signal caller there. So obviously Jaden Roberts, you could see his development coming to fruition last year. He really turned into a very productive lineman. And obviously getting Proctor back was huge for us. Tyler Booker, need we say more, former 5-star in high school. And then you've got, someone like an Elijah Pritchett, who's a redshirt sophomore, and he was a 5-star as well. And there are others. You can go down the line of Wilkin Formby, Casey Poe, William Sellers, a lot of talent there. It's finding the right 5, and like you say, this coach is going to be able to look at that pool of talent, look at their strengths, look at how they can complement each other and work together as a cohesive unit, because more so than anything really on that field, it all starts right there. Everything is won or lost in the trenches. So with an effective coaching style that puts the best players that play well together, they may not be the 5 best offensive linemen we have, but the 5 that play well together may end up being the recipe for success for us this year.
Absolutely agree. So now, obviously, covering the offense, now we're switching to the other side of the ball. We're going to go on the defensive side, and kind of been hoping as a Bama fan for the last couple of years that just ferocious Alabama defense would come back out. The guys who, nobody wanted to play, the guys that swarm the ball, the guys that just really get after it, that can seal the edges, the Alabama that we were accustomed to all the years in the 2000s and the 2010s of just a swarming, suffocating defense of that, when you were on offense, you weren't rushing for over 70 yards that night, you weren't passing for over 150. But this year, obviously saving all the years, you had the traditional 4-3 look, and now you bring in a guy like Kane Womack, whose father actually was one of the architects of a 4-2-5 defense, and that's what we're going to be running this year. And for those of y'all at home that really don't know, a 4-2-5 is you have 4 linemen, you have 2 defensive tackles. Your outside is called a bandit and a wolf position. Those are primarily responsible for getting after the quarterback and rushing the passer. You have 2 inside linebackers, and then you have 5 defensive backs. And of those 5 defensive backs, you have 2 corners, you have 1 safety, and a husky and a rover position at those. And those can be interchanged with guys who can play safety, guys who can play really in your dime packages, but it gives you a lot more versatility to match up against offenses that like to spread you out. So really kind of starting on that ferocious side, like you just said, going back to the offensive line, games are won and lost in the trenches, and that goes for the other side. That goes for the defensive line. And I think this year, from what I've read and from what I've seen, really the last really tenacious defensive line as a whole that we had was 2015-2016. That 2014 through that 16, when you had Jonathan Allen, Jaron Reed, Deshaun Robinson, DJ Petway, you had all those guys who just really got after it. And then, you had other guys like Denzel Duvall, who was the end, and Tim Williams, Ryan Anderson. You just had guys who got after the quarterback and who could just really, that front was just very aggressive. This year, we've not only got experience, but we have depth at the position, and we have a lot of talent. And, you start up front, with your leaders, Tim Keenan III, a guy who came in out of Ramsey High School, little overweight, dropped the weight, really got in, really sat behind a couple guys and learned from them, like Justin Aborby, DJ Dale. You have another absolute monster in Jaheim Otis, who again came over 400 pounds, now down to 316, monster, 6'6". Jamarian Latham in his 5th year now, really trying to make his presence known. You have Tim Smith, obviously a grad, who is back as well, good experience. But then you look at some of the guys who are still very talented, but you look at one guy in particular that I think is actually and was one of a post on my page of a breakout player for this year. But you look at LT Overton, former 5-star in that historic Texas A&M 2022 class. Had 2 years at A&M, obviously. First year was pretty good. Last year kind of dealt with some injuries, but transferred to Bama for a fresh start, but obviously was the number 1 player in the state of Georgia in 2022. and now has the opportunity at Bama, has slimmed down a bit, and is now not just basically in run support, but also really getting after the quarterback. So, of the defensive line, you got guys like James Smith and Damon Payne. You brought in a good class in Jeremiah Beeman, Isaiah Faga as well. You got guys like Jordan Renaud and Hill and Osborne, and Malachi Moore's little brother, Aiden Moore, as well. But when you look at all those guys at the front, your primary ones are going to be Keenan, Otis, Latham, and probably Overton. When you look at those guys, what's your outlook on those guys this year, especially from what we kind of saw last year? They started playing at a high level last year, but I think they're going to be even better this year.
It's amazing to watch a player develop from one year to the next. Maybe they get 30% of the snaps in their first year or two, and then all of a sudden they start to develop into a really good athlete or hone their skills. They're already good athletes. But, I mean, you mentioned it a while ago. Overton, and we can't overlook James Smith. He's a 5-star out of high school. He's sophomore this year. So we've got a good mix of, again, experience, and that's what you hope for. You hope you've got 5 or 6 guys that really have the experience, really have the game experience, and you've got 5 or 6 guys on the defensive line that can substitute for them that are fresh, that are new, that are just starting their development in college football. So I think that group as a whole is going to be fine, and we'll see how much they've grown from last year, the returners, and we'll see what the new guys can contribute. And hopefully it's coached up well and it's all put together in a nice, neat package, and we dominate that side of the line as well.
Agreed. And now kind of shifting to these new positions, and this is the one that I'm excited about. It's the Wolf position. And Christian Robinson is our new outside linebacker coach, came from Florida, did some time in Mississippi State as well, so has SEC experience, knows what the conference brings. But this Wolf position that, Kane Womack really describes in this defense and Christian Robinson describes in it, even Coach KD really describes in this is the position that kind of sets this whole defense and really what really causes this whole defense to go. This is the position that really gets after the quarterback, that their main responsibility. Yeah, they'll drop in coverage sometimes, but it is a 95 to 5% really variation of rushing the passer to dropping in coverage. And when you look at this group, that Wolf position, and Keon Keeley, I actually meant to be him. He's moved to the defensive line on the inside. So he is actually a defensive end, so he's going to be playing a little bit of the bandit position. So he's not actually in the Wolf position anymore. But you start with Quindarius Robinson, again, another of our 3 graduates this year, a guy who came in top 30 player in the nation in 2020, has really waited his time behind guys like Will Anderson, Chris Braswell, Dallas Turner. 6'6", 250 pounds, can really get after the quarterback. Good technique, knows the standard, has done this for 5 years now. But it's his time. He's waited out the process. Then you've got guys like Quay Russaw, who, again, with James Smith, came from Carver High School. A pair of 5-star teammates. Have heard great things about him. You see his high school footage. He's just attacking the ball. He's quick. He's Reuben Foster-esque on the quickness side. Then you have guys like Canu Coy, out of Louisiana, a guy who's also waited his turn, 6'4", very lengthy, can get after the quarterback. You also have Jeremiah Alexander, who's a 5-star from Thompson High School, the number 1 edge rusher in his class. And you have other guys, Johanze Pierre, Noah Carter, who we just brought in, Jashawn Ross in this class as well. But when you start with, I think, the 3 that are really going to be rotating the most, Coy, Robinson, and Russaw, with those guys at that position, as we've come accustomed to, you had Will Anderson, Turner, and then Braswell. What do we expect out of those guys this year at that position?
Alex, it's probably the most talented position group that we have on the field. You're looking at 9 players, and 8 players, and 5 or 5 stars, 3 or 4 stars. That is talent. It's dripping off of them. Development, I don't think is going to be a problem. We've got some experienced leadership there that will do what they're required to do and beyond, and will help develop the younger players. I think that is a solid position for us, especially on defense.
Yeah. And excited about that one. But then you also move to the inside position as well, and obviously 2 other guys glad to hang on to through the transition. You talk about your main signal caller, Deontay Lawson, who, a little fun fact, will be the first Alabama player to ever wear the number 0. So that'll be interesting to see this year. But then you have Jahad Campbell, also jersey change as well, from 30 to 11 as well. But then you also have guys, that they brought in, Quentin Reese, out of Ramsey High School as well. And, Justin Okronkwo from Germany, the number one international player, one of a few international guys on the roster, along with Olis Allman and James Burnett from Australia. Caden Jones, a 4-star. Sterling Dixon from Spanish Fort. But really the top three that Kane Womack's talking about using and rotating in these is, of course, Halston and Campbell. But, Justin Jefferson, number two JUCO player a year ago, number one linebacker out of JUCO, played in Kansas. But you look at those guys, they got a lot of speed. Lawson obviously has a lot of experience, but is really kind of taking on the roles. The signal caller, Jihad Campbell, can also call the signals too. So I think having two guys who really know how to call the signals if one goes out, and then you've got Justin, or you've got potentially Jefferson subbing in, or maybe even Sterling coming in, or any of those other guys coming in. You've got two guys on the field who can call the signals for the defense. I think that's a pretty good thing to have.
It is, and again, experience plays a role there, and you've got not one but two guys who are capable of calling that defense. Small group of guys, but all very talented, and I think one of these freshmen are really going to step up. And I think they'll shine. We typically see that one that pops up out of the crowd, and it's like, wow, okay, this kid is talented, and we're looking for that at that position. We've got two or three guys that are very experienced. We've got a redshirt junior, another junior, and a senior, and but then there's freshmen all behind them there, and so there's going to be one of those, or maybe two, that just really rise to the top. The cream rises.
Mm-hmm. So now kind of shifting into the last position group, and over the summer we've heard this has been sort of the most scrutinized position on the Bama defense, and it is the defensive backfield. Probably if you look at it from the transfer portal exit, it's probably the most decimated and probably the most, I guess you could say, attacked position group that Alabama had to deal with in the transfer portal. First of all, you lose Kool-Aid and Terrion Arnold to the NFL. Then you lose guys like Caleb Downs and Trey Amos and Antonio Kite, Earl Little Jr., Jake Pope to the transfer portal. So right there, and then you lose Tony Mitchell, who transfers and goes the JUCO route. But, really dealt with a lot of turnover. But you return guys like Malachi Moore, one of our other graduates as well. Obviously, has played big level football, high level football, has been a part of a national title team, has gone to another one, has been a part of 3 SEC championship teams now in 2021 and 23. Has played a lot of good football. Then you bring in another guy out of the portal in Domani Jackson, who was down to between USC and Alabama 2 years ago, the number one corner. Then you bring in Keon Sapp, who just played for a national title and won one with the Wolverines, who actually beat Alabama last year and had a good Rose Bowl against us, but you bring him in at safety. You also return a guy like Devontae Smith, not the receiver. He was poised to have a big year last year, again, running with the ones until he got hurt. But then I think the big thing about this staff, too, Saban set him up for success because of the recruiting class he brought in. So if you look at Jalen Mbakwe, Xavier Brown, and Xavier Mincy, all 5 stars, and 1, 2, and 3, respectively, at the cornerback position. So obviously, the talent is there. It's elite. You bring in a legacy in Dre Kirkpatrick Jr., and we all know his daddy, Dre Kirkpatrick Sr., played on a few of those championship teams as well. Then you also bring in, but then really Kalen Debeor and the staff addressed the need in the offseason through the transfer portal.
Yes, they
and
did.
You bring in guys like King Mack from Penn State, sophomore, but still played at a high level. Then you bring in Deshaun Jones from Wake Forest, who was second team All-SEC a year ago. Then you bring in Cam Howard from Charlotte, smaller school, but still played at a high level, first team Conference USA last year. First team All-American Conference. American Conference. And then you have also guys that stayed on. Brayson Hubbard, a guy who is a heck of an athlete, played at Ocean Springs High School in Mississippi as a quarterback. Jaleel Hurley, the last of really the guys from the state of Alabama to stay on through that transition. And then you just have all these other guys. And then you bring in who I think is the gem of the class in Rydarius Morgan out of Central Phoenix City. Just played for a state title, won a state title with Central Phoenix last year, a guy who attacks the ball, a guy who, it's hard to believe, a lot of people are saying are going to make us forget about Caleb Downs, and
That would be great.
That's some high level praise. So, really, when you look at all those guys and see what we got, we do have a lot of guys, but the only thing that it does is we have experience in some of those guys, but behind them, the only question is the depth and the experience. So, from that position group, what do you see in there?
Obviously, you alluded to it earlier, Alex, that Coach Deboor very quickly, as he watched departures or those who had already departed after Coach Saban had announced his retirement, he knew that was going to be an area of concern, and he addressed it. There are 6 true freshmen in that secondary that were recruited this past year. And I think that speaks volumes for the fact that he recognized that's where we need to start building talent to plug in some holes from some of the transfers. And whether you like this or not, it's reality. It's going to happen. Players are going to be lured away by promises and money and vehicles and things like that. It's going to happen. So you've just got to deal with it, just as we've seen Coach Saban over the years evolve into a different type of coach based on what he needed to do. The spread offense sort of bothered him at first. What'd he do? Went with it. Won national championships with it. He was able to adapt. Coach Deboor, I believe, is cut out of that same mold. And so he addressed that. Now, yes, we do have some youth there, but you think back over the years, the last 16, 17 years, and even beyond, that we would always have, just like I said about the inside linebackers a while ago, there's going to be one that's going to pop up there, man, and they're really going to show out. And there may be a couple more that are going to be very solid. Those are going to be your next guys, but they'll contribute this year. We've got the talent. We're overflowing with it really in that as much as we are at outside linebacker at the Wolf position. And so, it's going to be, they're going to be developed. They're going to learn. Now, they're going to have some mistakes. They're going to make some mistakes. We've sat here and watched a freshman come in and get some limited playing time, but just because of his athleticism, he got that time, but he made some mistakes. And then you see them evolve into the next year as being, preseason All-American, preseason All-SEC. And I think we've got the starting of a great set of guys in there that they're going to take up the slack, and they're going to grow up very fast. And everybody looks at Drake Kirkpatrick Jr. Comes in as a 3-star, but I bet you he shows us a little more than that. So I'm excited about that group. Coach Deboor addressed it, fixed it right off the bat. Now it's time to develop those players and make that part that everybody says is going to be our Achilles heel this year, that we're probably going to get exposed the most. I certainly hope that the coaching is there and the athletes are there to make that a successful group.
I think it is as well. And really, before we really go in, we're almost out of time, but before we go into our predictions, and so really just kind of looking through, we've gone through really the whole roster to kind of introduce you to the 2024 Crimson Tide as well. Obviously, just touching on this, obviously we landed the number one kicker out of the portal. Will Riker goes off to the NFL, the best kicker Alabama's ever had, the all-time leading scorer in college football history, Alabama history. And you replace him with the guy who won the Lou Groza Award a year ago, Graham Nicholson, and you have Connor Talty. James Burnup is back as our punter, and you have Neelan Hibbett, who actually just after 4 years on the roster as a walk-on got awarded a scholarship a week ago. So a huge congratulations to him. But then looking at fall camp top performers, just some that I listed, obviously on the opposite side of the ball, guys who, I've just been hearing a lot of names of, Justice Haynes, obviously, Caleb Odom, Ryan Williams, really the whole wide receiver group, Kendrick Law, guys on the line, Elijah Pritchett and Wilkin Formey kind of battling it out at right tackle. On the defensive side, on the line, been hearing a lot of good stuff about LT Overton. At the Wolf position, like we said, Quay Russaw, hearing a lot of good things about him and Canoe Coit. Inside linebacker, a guy who's really making some noise is Justin Okronkwo from Germany. A guy who they said They don't really assign stars to international players, so that's kind of why they just only gave him a 3-star. But a couple of the guys from the recruiting services in their articles and their write-ups of Justin said if he was in the United States, he'd be a 5-star because of just how he plays and the intensity he plays with. And then in the secondary, guys we're hearing about, King Mack is a guy who's emerged. Keon Sabb is a guy we've heard a lot about. Devontae Smith, obviously. Domani Jackson. Kane Womack and Maurice, a linguist, are very high on Jalen Mbakwe, a guy who could be returning some punts for us as well. Was a 5-star athlete at Clay Chalkville. Also won a state title last year. Played against now current teammate Ryan Williams against Saraland last year. That was a very good game. But then but overall, just fall camp top performers. That's kind of where we are on that. But moving into our first game, obviously Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky, 4 out of the last 5 years, has led the FBS in passing offense. And I don't think that's anything to really kind of bat an eye at. Western Kentucky did obviously make a bowl game a year ago, finished 8-5, had some injury mishaps in the season, lost some of their best receivers and some of their best guys on the line, so kind of struggled there. But were still able to navigate their way to a bowl win last year. But they do bring in a guy who's got a little experience playing Alabama, TJ Finley, who has been announced the starting quarterback for Saturday. Do bring in some pretty good physical receivers as well. So Alabama, Western Kentucky, the start of the Kalen Debeor era Saturday night at 6 o'clock, Bryant-Denny Stadium. A new era, a fresh start for the University of Alabama. What's your prediction and what do you think happens?
30.5-point favorite. Is that where we are right now?
We are.
Those things can change. And really expect nothing less. But just like you alluded to, Alex, very effective passing attack at Western Kentucky. Going against what many people think will be our toughest player group to develop and to play at the level that we're accustomed to, going at our secondary. So pressuring the quarterback, affecting the quarterback. It's like Nick Saban said forever, you don't have to sack him. All you got to do is affect him. And, if we're successful in doing that, I'm seeing a 45-14 game. I think that's probably what most prognosticators would say. Something in that neighborhood. Certainly hope it doesn't turn out to be a USF game from a year ago where we escaped with a narrow victory down in South Florida, which is the team we'll be facing week after this. But I feel like it will be business as usual. Halftime, we're going to, most improvements made from game 1 to game 2. We will make some mistakes along the way here. There'll be some timing issues. There'll be some false starts. There'll be an offsides. Kids they're tired of hitting each other. They want to hit someone else, and so a lot of these things will contribute to that. But I think when it all shakes out at the end of the day, Alabama will be 1-0 to start the first game of Kalen Debeor's era at Alabama, which hopefully will be a very long era at Alabama. And they will be victorious. And I think that line is about right for a 45-14, 45-17 victory, something.
I've got to be in agreement. I think, I think Kalen Debeor and this team is going to want to put on a show his first game. I mean, they're going to want to show, hey, this is the guy to replace Saban. We want to, we've heard all the doubt all summer long, and, we've heard this and we've heard that. And, we want to come out and, it doesn't matter who you play. It doesn't matter if you're playing Western Kentucky, Kennesaw State, Ohio State, Georgia, doesn't matter. You want to put on a show and you want to execute at the highest level possible. I think they're going to try their best to keep penalties down in this first game. I think that is something from a Kalen Debeor team that you just don't really see a lot of, is a lot of penalties. I think the team is going to definitely be more disciplined this year, than they were a year ago. And that was something that was kind of haunting us a year ago was penalties that killed drives or extended drives for other teams. But as far as the line, I think it's pretty accurate as well. I said this on a show last week. I think if I'm Kalen Debeor and Nick Sheridan, the only reason I'm saying we score less than 40 is why I'm going like a 38-14, is because I don't think you reveal your full playbook in the first 2 weeks. Because, you got to go to Wisconsin in week 3, you get a week off, and then you start with Georgia. You've got South Carolina, Missouri later in the year. You've got to go to Tennessee, to LSU. So don't think you want to show everything your first 2 weeks against Western Kentucky and South Florida. And then you've got to save that for week 3 on the road to Wisconsin. Then you've got a big top 10 showdown, which is probably what it's going to be against Georgia. Could be a top 5 showdown, could be a top 3 showdown by week 5. But that's the only reason I'm saying is that I'm saying they're probably going to try to keep it as simple as they can, while still showing some flashes here and there, but not unloading the full thing yet. So I think it's a game that we can keep in front of us for sure, and a game that could be close, in the first 1.5 quarters, maybe even to halftime. But I think second half, that's when talent and the depth and the strength and conditioning takes over. The humid Alabama heat takes over on some of the Kentucky boys that don't really experience that in the summer. But Western Kentucky's not anything to bat an eye at. They are a team that went. This coach has taken them to a bowl game in his 3 years, has drastically improved them again, have a good passing attack. They're an offense that's going to test that secondary of what has been our most scrutinized position group in the offseason. So, like I said, I've got to go with a kind of a 38-14, potentially, maybe a 42-14 game. Maybe we get something late, but just first and foremost, we want to get everybody out of there healthy. Don't want to get anybody key hurt. But I do want to start off the era the right way. Nick Saban started off against Western Carolina. You and I got the privilege to go to that game, back in 2007. And, first play of the game, Terry Grant ripped off a 75-yard touchdown run. So, right in our end zone. So, that was, he started off, it was a 49-7 win. So, maybe that can be pretty reflective of that. But, other than that, I like to see the Kalen Debeor era getting off to a hot start, a quick start, as he hopes to do. And, I think it'll be a loud crowd. I think the crowd will be happy to see, something new, something fresh. It's new. It's going to be a little weird, but it's a good weird. So, like I said, I think we got the best guy for the job.
Just one closing remark I'll make. You've done a fantastic job as usual tonight, Alex. And I just want to say to the audience out there that listens to my son every week, there's no one I know who knows Alabama football inside and out as well as he does. He keeps me informed. I used to do the same for my father, and it's such a pleasure to share this kind of experience with him and to be a part of the success that he's had with his podcast and his now YouTube and the other organizations he's a part of that he's part of their shows as well. So stay tuned and listen to him. He's going to tell you exactly what's going on. It's going to be a little crimson glasses that he's wearing, but that's okay. We're Bama fans. We love the Tide, and we love Alabama football, all sports. And so just stick with him and continue watching and listening. And if you want the best Bama news that there is, just stay with his podcast.
Well, I appreciate the comments as always, and obviously appreciate all of you guys as well. Keep following the page as you've been seeing the ticker that has been scrolling the entire time. Those are all of my socials. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok, and obviously here on YouTube as well. All of those are at the bottom. But also be sure to tune in. If you do not have access to YouTube, be sure to tune in to Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'm also live on those. Also Amazon Music and iHeartRadio as well. Those will obviously go live on Thursdays, as well as the episode will go live on YouTube as well. Also, we're a member of the College Huddle. You can find my episodes on there. You can also find my episodes on the Discord link as well that I will attach in the comment section of the video. Drop a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll be bringing you content all year long, from pre-game analysis to score predictions to post-game analysis each week. I'll be back here at the same time next week to recap the first game of the season and to preview the South Florida game, to talk a little bit about what's going on around the other scenes in college football with other college football teams as well. Also, keep up with me on Instagram. That's where I primarily post each and every day. Still in the middle of our countdown. 3 days till kickoff, obviously. Tomorrow will be 2. Keep informed with game day graphics, final score graphics. I leave my thoughts there after every game. I inform you of any injury updates, any practice updates, any news that we get, any news that I get. You will be the first to know at the Bama Factor on Instagram. So, hope everybody has a good first official weekend of college football season. Hope everybody is safe in their travels. If you're traveling from Western Kentucky to Tuscaloosa, safe travels there. Hope you enjoy your time there. To all the Alabama fans traveling to Tuscaloosa or wherever you may be, roll tide to all of you. And hopefully we get off to a good start this 2024 season. Dad, thank you for coming on again.
My pleasure.
And everybody, good night and God bless.